I've heard a lot about the manhwa's adaptation for the second season of Solo Leveling, from it being a fantastic adaptation to it ruined the story. So in this video, we are comparing them to each other, episode by episode, chapter by chapter, to factually see the differences for all of Solo Leveling Season 2, and explain the strengths and weaknesses of how each version tells the story. This is going to be a long one, for my channel at least, so let's get right into it. Solo Leveling Season 2, Episode 1, Episode 13 overall, begins adapting Chapter 46 of the manhwa. Because there isn't a season break for the manhwa, it has a small transition panel we don't see adapted in the anime, of Jinwoo leaving the job change quest dungeon. There will be some little changes like that I'll probably miss, because they don't really change anything for the overall story. Then we get right into where Season 2 begins, with Jinwoo oversleeping and waking up to a phone call, reminding him he has a meeting with his sister's teacher. Although the events are the same, the visuals are very different. This first comparison sums up a subtle and consistent change between manhwa and anime. I wouldn't say comedy is a big part of the manhwa, but it is funnier and it's definitely not afraid to make Jinwoo look goofy. In the manhwa, we get an extra scene of Sung going to a bank. Overall, it's not that important, but it does show how his finances have improved after working with Jinho. The meeting with the principal and conversation with Hong Sang-yi, I have no idea how to pronounce Korean names, so bear with me for this entire video, goes about the same in both. But there is a slight difference in the characterization of Sung Jinwoo. Overall, the manhwa does a better job of transitioning between the weakest hunter of all mankind into Chad Solo Leveling we all know and love. In the anime, he almost instantly feels like an entirely different character, and there seems to be an intentional effort to make him feel more distant and cool. He's much more expressive and talkative in the manhwa. It's partially the general style of comics, not being able to show subtlety as well, but it's also pretty obviously a conscious decision. An added detail we see that plays into this is that Sung is trying to scare Han Sang-yi out of becoming a hunter, which is made clear in his internal monologue in the manhwa. Then we cut to Hwang Dong-soo arriving and meeting Woo Jin-chul at the airport. This scene is mostly the same, except the anime lacks a nice little moment of when some normal people feel the effect of Dong-soo's power. Manhwa has a scene of Dong-soo in the car with Jin-chul. It's just a transition to explain how he knows where to find Jinwoo's current location in the gate. All throughout the season, the timing of when it cuts to the B-plot, or when certain things are said, are shifted around compared to the manhwa. Unless it majorly changes the story, I won't be mentioning it as a difference. Manhwa gives a lot more time outside the gate as Baek Young-hoo figures out what to do about the situation. There's even an extra character who vouches for the A-rank hunter, Kim Chul, to take care of the situation. The fight with the bears is similar, but there are small details that make the manhwa flow better than the anime. Also, this is a perfect time to appreciate how fantastic the art is. Solo Leveling anime has some really great animation, but it's incredible how effortless it is to follow the action in the manhwa. I'm not much of a fan of the webtoon art style, but the movement and lighting and everything is just so good. This whole arc in the Red Gate plays out overall the same. So here's a few rapid fire moments in the manhwa that aren't in the anime. At the first campfire, there is some dialogue Jinwoo has about his sister. It's a nice little moment before he explains he has to exercise to not get a penalty. Jinwoo has his hood on. The manhwa has a completely different monster that decimates Kim Chul's party before the ice elves show up as the final straw and make him run away. Solo Leveling Season 2, Episode 2, Episode 14 overall. Chapter 52. Hwang Dong-soo leaves the Red Gate because he is bored. In the anime, he gets a notification on his phone which forces him to leave. There's a little bit added to the fight against the ice elves in the anime, like this super sick scene of Sung catching an arrow being shot at the other party members. The manhwa is more consistent in how it shows his abilities playing into each fight. For example, when he stabs the ice elf with his dagger, the paralysis effect activates, but it's dismissed because the boss stats were too high. Although the anime usually does at least show some visual cue of it happening, there are a few instances where it's completely omitted. After they leave the gate, the anime has an extra small scene of Jinwoo dealing with killing a human again. Season 2, Episode 3, Episode 15 overall, Chapter 56. The first change in episode 3 is a reoccurring difference. There is a lot more variation for the monsters in the manhwa. Jinwoo and Jinho fight these cool rock creatures instead of generic orcs as in the anime. While Jinho and Jinwoo are at dinner in the manhwa, a TV in the restaurant shows Baek holding a press conference, talking about the recent dungeon. There's a lot more conversation between Jinho and Jinwoo that makes them feel more like actual friends, or brothers. But the essence of their conversation is shown in the anime. Then it cuts to Baek getting a call from Byung-gu, who informs him of the growing threat of Jeju Island, with the discovery of a winged bug. The anime starts setting up Jeju in a different way later in the episode. Then we get to the next arc where Jinwoo plays Demon Souls. And now we have one of the biggest changes so far between the anime and manhwa. While Sung learns of the elixir of life after the fight with Cerberus in the anime, in the manhwa, he is just doing this to level up. He doesn't find the recipe until after he beats the first part of Demon Souls, something I still need to do. So any dialogue relating to the elixir isn't in the manhwa. Instead, Jinwoo thinks more about the other rewards of this dungeon. The manhwa confirms this hellscape is a copy of Seoul, South Korea, and there are a lot of other small details, such as Sung's character being able to see how much experience he needs to level up, and how he compares himself to Baek. The fights have a little more detail sometimes, like when Jinwoo fights Midas. It shows a lot more of the battle against the undead. The other part of this that differs is when the story cuts to the side characters. First, the conversation with Yoo Jin-ho and his father is quite a bit different in the manhwa. His father brings in a witness of Sung Jinwoo's power, and we get a lot more of his thought process about the matter. Easily the funniest moment in the anime for me is when it cuts to Hae-in in the pool for literally no reason at all. While at the pool, she has a flashback to learning about the winged bugs. It goes back to her in the pool, and then it cuts back to Sung Jinwoo. None of this is in the manhwa, and her being at the pool is the most pointless scene I've ever seen in anything. When I was watching it, I was actually thinking it would be funny if it just showed her in the pool, gave no information, and then went back to Sung Jinwoo fighting. And then it literally did that. The flashback had the only important information. Anyways, then we have Ang Sang-min keeping tabs of Sung Jinwoo and wondering where he disappeared to. The manhwa fleshes out the scene more, and we see they are getting information from Song Yi. At the end of this arc is when Jinwoo gets the elixir of life recipe after defeating Metis in the manhwa. So there's an extra scene of him visiting his mother with new resolve to save her. Season 2, Episode 4, Episode 16 overall, end of Chapter 61. On to the Hunter reevaluation. The anime has a scene where Sung talks through why he wants to reevaluate himself, while the manhwa just cuts straight from the hospital to him applying to have a reevaluation. There's a little more detail in the manhwa, and it's told to us very differently, but the general information given is the same, so it's not really worth explaining all the little changes. One detail that's funny about the anime is when they add something from the manhwa, but in an extremely subtle way, such as this dude being super excited getting C rank. It's not in the anime, except it is. The guilds and the Hunter Association trying to recruit Sung Jinwoo goes the same. Just assume there is slightly more dialogue or internal monologue in about every scene. However, there is one nice little detail after Sung turns down a position at the Hunters Association where he tells Woo Jin-chul that he wasn't the one who cleared the double dungeon. Next, we have a notable added detail while Hwang Dong-soo recovers from his fight. While the deputy director arrives to speak to him, he shows Dong-soo a video of Sung Il-hwan saving people from falling rubble, and that's why he questions whether Il-hwan is a magical beast, as Dong-soo says. Another interesting thing the manhwa does is when there's new information or a better explanation of something, it will show scenes from earlier in the story as an example, which makes the world feel very thought out. We see this when Sung is shopping for magical items online. The next very small but interesting detail absent from the anime is the manhwa mentioning that machines don't work inside of dungeons, which is why they must do it the old-fashioned way, with magically enhanced pickaxes. As Sung enters the dungeon yearning to mine, the manhwa explains how dungeons are given ranks. It's by the amount of magical energy the gate emits, meaning higher ranked dungeons are usually large and contain many high rank monsters. However, a B rank dungeon could contain very few powerful monsters or a lot of weak ones. I don't believe this is ever explained in the anime. The mining goes about the same in both versions. However, the manhwa doesn't make him as gung-ho about fighting the boss right away, and also has an interaction between Sung and the mining leader who explains that bosses could leave their area and kill everyone in the dungeon, but that is extremely unlikely and obviously has never happened to him. Season 2, Episode 5, Episode 17 overall, Chapter 67. The situation where Sung gets stopped by Cha Hae-in is the same in both versions. However, in the manhwa, there isn't this massive closed gate, and he actually sees the giant boss, which makes the threat of disturbing it seem much more real. Alright, we finally got a big change from the manhwa. After Jinwoo agrees to work one more day for the mining company, we get a new scene where Yoo Jinho takes his cousin out to eat to talk about Jinwoo. We also get the first mention of the movie star who is putting on a publicity stunt. Then Jinho gets a phone call from Jinwoo to meet up later. At the job site, Jinwoo accepts the offer to be the baggage carrier, but the group he joins has about twice as many members in the manhwa. They definitely changed it to make it easier to keep track of, but the idea of a guild having this massive of a group in their secondary strike team makes it look much more impressive. As with nearly every scene, there is some extra dialogue as they walk into the dungeon. Sung thinks about Ju-hee as an A-rank healer basically explains how hero shooters work to Jinwoo, while reassuring him that the only way he'll get attacked is if everyone else dies. The ensuing battle is a little different because of the extra hunters, and we get more of Jinwoo's thoughts on why he helped them and why he's keeping it a secret, which makes him a lot more likable. Interestingly, after they get trapped by the orcs, the anime actually has an extra detail of Sung comparing this, where everyone is prepared to sacrifice themselves for him to escape, to the double dungeon when everyone abandoned him. Season 2, Episode 6, Episode 18 overall, end of Chapter 71. The boss battle is about the same, with small changes as always. The first most interesting detail I don't think the anime adapted very well was, after he asked permission to kill the magical beast from the squad leader, he copies what the boss had done to the leader by throwing up one of the orcs against the ceiling and the floor over and over again, which is pretty funny. When Sung reveals he can turn the defeated high orcs into his shadows, and the boss has an existential crisis, in the manhwa he makes mention that Sung could be a whatever this is. I don't know why that line was removed, because it adds a lot of mystery of what being a player means. The anime has an extra scene during the battle where Choi Jong-in considers his options for dealing with the gate that spiked in magical power. This little teamwork moment wasn't adapted, which is tragic. In the manhwa, when Cha arrives, her actions are given a lot more urgency. It's kind of funny in the anime, she just casually talks to the strike team while this massive battle is taking place. There's quite a bit extra in the anime for the final battle against Kargagan. The anime made him look like a much more powerful opponent, while in the manhwa, Sung pretty much dominates the entire fight, and very darkly has Kargagan's personal guards stab him to death while he's down. One extra detail in the manhwa is Sung keeping inventory of his shadows. Once he gets the army of orcs, he has to send some lower level shadows away. Season 2, Episode 7, Episode 19 overall, end of Chapter 76. There's an extra, very short scene in the anime where Jenna and Sung Yi are at school, and overhear girls talking about the press conference with Lee Min-sung. Instead of the earlier conversation we saw in the manhwa with Jinho's cousin, in the anime, this is where we learn of Min-sung's bad reputation. Manhwa has extra dialogue as always. Min-sung mentions part of his arrogance comes from being the son of the vice president of Yujin Construction. Overall, the manhwa puts more emphasis on Min-sung's part of the scene. It's told differently to set up his story instantly being irrelevant once the media learns of the new S-rank hunter. In the manhwa, Jinna isn't eating Pocky when she sees her brother on the livestream. Only the most important information in this video. Finally, we have an actually big change. Yo Jinho's father is so much more cool in the manhwa. Instead of immediately chastising his son when he learns of Jinwoo's plan to make a guild, he explains his reasoning for creating a guild. Since he was already extremely wealthy, he didn't do it for profits. He started this company to protect his family against hunters, since a single hunter can easily be more powerful than an entire military force. He wants to find reliable and trustworthy hunters, and he's happy his son found someone like that. Then he offers Jinho the company, but Jinho surprises him by refusing, so he can join Jinwoo's guild. This is much more interesting than in the anime, where he is just a generic overbearing father that complains about Jinho shirking his responsibilities. President Baek immediately considers the possibility of Jinwoo solo leveling in the manhwa, while the anime cuts back to him later considering it in his office. This scene in the office is also in the manhwa, but with more detail about how Sung was weaker than him when they first met, but not anymore. He also decides to give up trying to recruit him. Then we get an extra little scene in the manhwa where where Hwang Dong-soo learns that Jinwoo is still alive, and he's not too happy about it. The scene with Sung in the magical artifact store has some strange changes from the manhwa. Initially, he gets the Orb of Avarice appraised, then looks for fire-resistant equipment. The caretaker explains fire resistance is very common, but also very expensive. The visuals and the way it comes up for Sung to try to break the glass of the case are very different. Surprisingly, there's actually a little bit of extra detail in the anime too, like Sung trying not to reveal how he just pulls weapons out of thin air. Immediately after, the anime shortens the next scene considerably. In the manhwa, we see Ahn Sang-min, who had been trying to recruit Sung Jin-woo from very early on, decide he won't give up on recruiting Jin-woo to the White Tiger Guild, despite Baek moving on. We see reporters stalking Jin-woo's house, and the siblings dealing with it. Then we get Jin-ho knocking on the door, asking to stay over because he got kicked out of his house. Sung shuts the door in his face, and Jin-ho gets a hotel. Then we see Jin-ho's father and mother talking about him. Jin-ho's father is mad at his son for working for someone else rather than paving his own path. Then he collapses from what we later learn is eternal slumber. The anime is very different. Jin-ho never gets kicked out, he willingly leaves, the reporters are already gone when Jin-ho arrives, Jin-woo lets him stay the night, and we don't see anything from Ahn Sang-min. A lot of dialogue is changed, but Jin-woo still has Jin-ho take him to Daesung Tower, where he enters the gate. Overall, there were a lot more changes in that part compared to how the rest of the story had been going, but in the end, we are still given the same important information and still end up in the same place. Sung Jin-woo starts Demon Souls 2? He initially encounters a large demon, which he has Tusk defeat with the help of the Orb of Avarice. In the manhwa, the demon's design is less creepy, but much cooler. And when Tusk uses his magical blast, he wipes out a massive area and kills multiple high-level demons. Not much worth mentioning for Jin-ho's dad in the hospital, except he is once again a much cooler and more interesting character in the manhwa. We see a winged ant arrive at a small village. The manhwa explains those hunters are E and D rankers, who are the only hunters in the small island they live on. Whenever a gate opens, they have to immediately call for help because it takes 3 days for anyone to arrive. The little bit of extra detail really helps make the appearance of the ant more tragic, while also building out the world more. In the dungeon, the anime skips forward a lot. The things Jin-woo explains he had done in the anime are actually shown in the manhwa. It gets deeper into his thought process and how the shadows work. Many of the anime's rapid-fire scenes are taking place within days of each other in the manhwa. The anime adds some rocks and knickknacks to Sung's battle map, where the manhwa just had him drawing in the sand. Season 2, Episode 8, Episode 20 overall, Chapter 82. The first change is this demon has massive ears, slightly different tinted skin, and shorter hair in the anime. In Sung's conversation with the demon girl, there is one small detail worth noting. She faints in the anime after the system forces her to terminate the conversation, but in the manhwa, he had asked another question before she faints, about the enemy that they were getting ready to fight, and Jin-woo notes that that is when she fainted. Now there's a major difference in the build-up to the Jeju Island raid. While, again, the ending point is the same, with Japan teaming up with Korea to take out the threat, there are some very different scenes in the manhwa that are unfortunately left out. Obviously, there's a lot more dialogue like usual. Go makes a mention of hunters from Russia, which is interesting. But in the first battle against the ant, which is analyzed in a boardroom in the anime and shown a little bit of in the manhwa, we see that the ant is intelligent enough to target the healers first, which is more than I can say about most Marvel rival players. Then word comes that Hwang Dong-soo is planning to join the Jeju Island raid, although with the purpose of finding Jin-woo to kill him. Woo Jin-chul denies his request to enter South Korea. Then a national level hunter meets with Go. National level hunters are given a lot more emphasis in the manhwa. They are beyond S rank and have the potential to single-handedly, by force, take down an entire country. The national level hunter asks about Jin-woo, warns about Dong-soo, and then leaves, lamenting that South Korea doesn't have enough money to make helping in the Jeju Island raid worth his time. This guy does appear in the anime, but it's only a short flashback. We'll get into that near the end of this video. As for Jin-woo at this point, the manhwa also has some extra details. After the demon girl wakes up, Jin-woo shows that several other demons tried to kill her while she was asleep. She explains demons don't consider intelligent demons as their own. Otherwise, we just see a little extra context in the demon's castle. We see them have dinner, and we are introduced to the system's party system when the demon girl joins Jin-woo. We also see a lot more about the leveling up of Tank and Igris. One thing that is unfortunately not in the anime is Jinwoo scaling S ranks in his head. Demon Girl asks if all humans are as strong as him, and he replies with one or two others, thinking about Go and Cha. Then he considers that because S rank's mana can't be measured, there can be massive differences in power between S rank hunters, despite being in the same rank. The anime has two side scenes that aren't in the manhwa. First is the Japanese hunter Goto Ryuji watching the scientists study the dead ant, and second is Cha and Jong-in discussing their involvement in the next Jeju Island raid. At least for this much of the story, this is by far the aspect the anime adapts the worst. The manhwa gives the secondary plot time to breathe, which leads to interesting world building and better side characters, while the anime only shows you these disjointed few-second clips that are quickly forgotten once it gets back to the actually interesting part of Jinwoo's adventure. It's been like that for the entirety of the season, but here it's especially egregious. That said, the anime has also put an effort to make Cha and Jong-in more important and memorable characters. In the manhwa, they are often left out of the story for much longer stretches of time. Back to the episode, when Goto Ryuji and Go Gunhee meet to discuss the plans for the raid, we get an extra glimpse into Ryuji's mind in the manhwa. We see that he wants to leverage this situation to become a national level hunter for the sake of Japan. For Sung Jinwoo, the point at which he tells Demon Girl to go home and she insists she stay with him happens while they're at the 97th floor, not the 90th. There's a few small changes with Jinwoo's fight against Baran. Sometimes the anime has extra details, and sometimes the manhwa has extra information. Interestingly, the wyvern doesn't get decapitated in the manhwa. The fire from Tusk takes out its wing, and that's enough to ground Baran. This battle is very nearly 1-to-1, but the death of Baran is much more over the top in the anime. Season 2, Episode 9, Episode 21 overall, Chapter 88. We start Chapter 88 by seeing the shadows looting the area, which is a nice little moment, but the anime gets right into the most important item, which is the last ingredient to craft the Water of Life. There's more emphasis put on the crafting of the Water of Life in the manhwa. Jinwoo is much more expressive, which adds more weight to it, and we get to see that only one of the materials were used up in the crafting process. Because of how different the setup for Jeju Island has been, the conversation between Go and Woo Jin-chul is very different. However, they are still talking about the same situation. There's also a great little detail that is removed from the end of the scene, when Go and Woo sense Jinwoo using his shadow exchange ability. The same is missing from the next scene with Byung-gu and Baek. Jinwoo saving his mother from eternal slumber has one major difference. A small scene where the doctors don't want to release her because they want to study how she recovered. The head doctor quickly caves as soon as he finds out the one requesting her to be released is an S-ranked hunter. This next part has a lot of differences between versions. First, in the manhwa, Jinwoo checks his phone since he'd been in the dungeon for so long. On the news, the first thing he sees is images of his dragon flying over the city. Then he receives a call from Go. He initially assumes that it's about the dragon, but Go is of course calling about the next Jeju Island raid. In the anime, Go's press conference is shown, and there's a flashback to Baek, Byung-gu, and Yeon-suk talking about the third Jeju Island raid. Neither of these scenes are in the manhwa. We see Jinwoo and Jinna take their mom home, and they clean the house together. For the manhwa, this scene doesn't happen until after the S-ranked hunters train together. This is where we get mention of the national level hunter who was shown earlier in the manhwa. Woo and Go basically recap that scene before Sung arrives. Actually, seeing it was much more interesting. Once Jinwoo meets with Go, both stories start to line up again. Other than a little extra emphasis on Goto Ryuji, the conversations are the same. The first notable change within the training grounds is that the A-rank guild leader and the A-rank interpreter for Japan fight after they argue about how powerful they are. This leads to the sparring contest that Goto Ryuji suggests for all the S-ranks. Season 2, Episode 10, Episode 22 overall, Chapter 91. When Sung goes to spar Goto Ryuji, we get an added scene in the anime where Juhi calls about being part of the defensive team for the Jeju Island raid. We also see Goto mention their S-rank healer, Shimizu, and that she can heal whoever is injured in their battle, which he declares will be Sung Jinwoo. When the news explains the mutating ants, there's a different news reporter. There's also, you're gonna be really surprised about this, a lot more dialogue in the manhwa. After this, the scenes are completely different. The anime shows Byung-gu wrestling with the decision to fight, Jinho trying to talk Song-yi out of helping with the defense force, and Juhi once again teaming up with Chi-yul. The manhwa has Jinwoo getting hate comments, and then playing friendly neighborhood S-ranked hunter on an unsuspecting murderer. First, Sung meets with Jinho in the new office space he acquired for their guild. They discuss the extra members they need, and then Jinho gives Sung a letter from a foreigner looking for him. This turns out to be an American organization trying to recruit him. Then he suddenly uses shadow transfer to teleport into the streets, where a man is planning to kill a woman. Sung gets stabbed with no effect, then tells the man to turn himself in or he'll be killed by his high-arc shadow. Next, the manhwa shows how the interaction with Jinwoo affected Goto Ryuji. It explains 1/10 of the entire hunter population of South Korea is helping out for the Jeju Island raid. And we also learn more about the cameraman with the S ranks. Once the raid begins, we see the Japanese team make a note about the ants cannibalizing other ant corpses as they walk through what used to be Jeju City. The anime cuts to Go and Woo a few times, but those parts aren't in the manhwa. Choi Jong-in is so much cooler as they begin the raid in the manhwa. After he blasts the ants flying at them, he decides he needs to gauge how strong they are, and just jumps out of the plane. He talks about how as a boy he would torch ants with a lighter as he decimates the area. Then he lets everyone know they can drop down safely. Season 2, Episode 11, Episode 23 overall, end of Chapter 96. Thankfully for my sanity in writing this video, the battle against the ants has no major changes. There's always a little bit of extra dialogue or things happening at slightly different times, but nothing that really changes the core of the story. Until the manhwa doesn't have Baek searching the tunnels for the queen after defeating the previous royal guards. That happens a little later. Instead, Byung-gyu buffs everyone, and then they fight another group of ants. The anime pretty much takes this fight and the fight against the queen and puts them together. The anime has a short scene where it explains what the Japanese B team is doing, while the other teams are getting wiped out by the super ant. This isn't in the manhwa. The battle against the queen is mostly the same, but told very differently. The manhwa shows more of the audience reacting to the live stream, including an old couple who had a child that died in a previous raid. Presumably, this is In-suk's parents. We also hear that only the United States, China, Russia, and France have cleared S-rank gates. The anime overall has a more cohesive battle, at least to me. The manhwa doesn't show much of the battle against the Queen's Guard, and it's hard to follow, which is not a critique I have of literally any other part of the manhwa. The anime makes it look much bigger, more meaningful, and more exciting. The ending of the fight is also a lot better in the anime. It gives a moment of relief from defeating the queen and shows the reactions around Korea, before leading to the next threat of all the ants returning. In the manhwa, they get word immediately that ants are returning, and then Super Ant shows up. Dealing with the Super Ant is the same in both versions, but when Super Ant attacks Goto Ryuji, the manhwa cuts to a Chinese battleship. They talk about Goto Ryuji wanting to become a national level hunter, but the captain doesn't think he compares to the Chinese national level hunter Liu Zigang. The next difference I had heard about before making this video. It's really insignificant, but still kind of interesting. Where is Sung Jin-woo when he uses exchange? In the anime, we see him on a rooftop in the super epic scene, while in the manhwa, he is just chilling on the street, presumably watching the livestream broadcast. It's a really epic moment either way, that is set up really well with the planting of the shadows on the S ranks and the gaining of this new ability. Season 2, Episode 12, Episode 24 overall, Chapter 101. This part is significantly different from manhwa to anime, so I'm going to explain how the manhwa goes down, then recap what happens in the anime. The manhwa continues with the cameraman thinking about his father as he assumes he is about to die, before the shadows kill the bugs in front of him. Then we see the news station decide to go live, as Sung joins in the fight, raising the ants' shadows to fight each other. After this, he heals the S ranks who are still alive. Cha is unable to be healed, so Jinwoo plans to leave, but that's when Super Ant shows up. Then we get a flashback of just a few minutes ago, where we see the reactions of people watching the broadcast as it gets cut. The news announces Byung-gyu's death, then restarts the broadcast. The Japanese freak out because Super Ant killed Goto Ryuji. Jinwoo's mom whacks the TV because it stops working, so Jinho watches the broadcast on her phone. And Go gets as hyped as we're supposed to get for this fight. Then we get back to the battle. The anime also starts on the cameraman, but we hear nothing about his father. We see Sung fight some more ants, then we get the reactions of Juhee and Chi-yul, followed by Go and Woo. The news station has an inexplicable outage and they start working on fixing it. Sung heals the S-rankers but can't heal Cha, however a massive group of bugs starts swarming them. Then we see Go and Woo in a boardroom as they try to figure out what is happening and what to do. There's a really nice moment here where Go talks about resenting his aging body because all he wants to do is be there helping them. Next we see Jinna smacking the TV and then going into her room to check it on her phone. Then the Japanese react to Goto's signal being cut. Jinwoo then talks to the S-Rankers, he gives battle strategy, and then asks them to keep quiet about presumably his plan to raise the dead ants. However, he doesn't raise any of them until after the battle in the anime. Both stories realign here, except the anime adds the broadcast getting fixed, so we see reactions to the live battle. When Super Ant lands the first punch on Jinwoo, the manhwa shows him spitting out a tooth, whereas the anime makes him look totally unfazed. However, the anime also makes Super Ant seem more sturdy, as in the manhwa, Jinwoo's punch sends him flying. The anime just has him bend backwards Matrix style. After Jinwoo gets poisoned, the anime and manhwa show the living Japanese hunters. However, the anime has a little extra. The anime fight is more flashy and over the top. The manhwa doesn't have the ant using ice powers, and Jinwoo overpowers him much quicker. We also see more of the S-Rank's reaction to the battle in the manhwa. After the battle in the anime, he attempts to use the elixir of life on Cha, but it fails. This is a nice little addition to remove any allegations of this being a plot hole. But in the manhwa, Season 2, Episode 13, Episode 25 overall, middle of Chapter 104. He considers his options and then decides to use Byung-gu. It's more dramatic in the manhwa, as he has to try 3 times before extraction works. It seems Byung-gu is initially resistant to becoming a shadow. After this, in the anime, we see the Japanese Plan 9 being foiled. Whatever that is. It's never mentioned in the manhwa. In that version, the Japanese team retreats immediately and then fights the rest of the ants on the battleships. There's a small bit in the manhwa where Jinwoo summons Kaisel to thin out the ants near the helicopter as the S-Ranks leave. After that, he goes back to take care of the eggs and extract the Super Ant Shadow. At this point, there's an additional scene in the manhwa where we are introduced to David Brennan, who wants to recruit Jinwoo to the United States. Obviously, this isn't in the anime because it's the last episode, and there's no reason to set up something that won't be revealed until the next season. Occasionally, the animation of the anime does improve on the visuals of the manhwa, being limited to its single panels of art. However, the summoning of Super Ant Shadow is not one of them. The manhwa goes a lot more in-depth here with Jinwoo's thoughts. He considers why Super Ant can talk, and if some of his other shadows might be able to once they get high enough rank. He names Super Ant Biru, after the author of the zoology book The Ants, that won the Pulitzer Prize in 1991, which is a really weird reference and one I had to look up. Next, he extracts the Queen's Shadow, but because its only use was commanding the ant hordes, Jinwoo releases her. Then he stops his soldiers from looting the place because the city will need the resources to rebuild. But he does keep the one essence stone that dropped from Biru, formerly Super Ant. The manhwa also shows more of the different guilds fighting off the hordes of ants, but less of the S-Rankers' helicopter escape. However, the biggest difference is that the aftermath of dealing with the ants lasted for 2 days in the manhwa. The manhwa has another scene here with Thomas Andre. He gets information about Jinwoo's relationship with Hwang, and laments that it will be difficult to meet Jinwoo now that all of this has happened. But if Jinwoo and Hwang get into a fight, it's clear Thomas Andre will not be on Jinwoo's side. Next, the manhwa goes to the cleanup crew in the ant caves. The leader has this really funny monologue about wanting to become an Olympic athlete until he found out he had awakened as a hunter, which bans him from competing. There's no mention of the memorial service because that isn't happening yet. Otherwise, it plays out the same. The manhwa shows the memorial service, then Go talks to Jinwoo, but the conversation is quite a bit different. He gives him information for starting a guild, and then mentions the event in the previous scene with the hunters who were put to sleep. Then, Adam White from the Federal Bureau of Hunters meets Jinwoo in the parking lot, and he goes through this whole situation that is completely skipped over in the anime and will likely be shown in Season 3. Then, we finally get to Jinwoo on the highway as a gate appears and blocks traffic. Go lets Sung take care of it, and then it turns into a red gate. We get the monologue about hunters, and Jinwoo says, "On to the next target," which is the same in anime and manhwa. Finally, the anime has an extra scene with Cha and Jong-in, which, as far as I can tell, is nowhere in the manhwa. And that's it! Overall, I do like the story in the manhwa better. Jinwoo is less of an edgelord, but the story is given more depth, and the pacing is slowed down just enough to let each scene breathe a little more. But there are certain things where the anime does improve on the manhwa. It's better at not over-explaining things, and the animation is really good, even if the art of the manhwa is usually better. Still, both series are not significantly different, and I think this is a fantastic adaptation overall, even if there are some strange and unnecessary changes, like the Japanese having a "you foiled my plan" moment in Jeju, and Jinwoo's guild progress being much slower. Both series still have the same overall faults and strengths, but the story has only improved as it goes on, and I think the next season will be even better. With this, you know generally all the changes from anime to manhwa. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe to show support if you liked it, because this was absolutely miserable to make. Check out this video on the end screen for more of my thoughts on solo leveling, or watch this other comparison video about Trigun. Jia miao!